All right, welcome back from Thanksgiving break. Today is Tuesday, last day of November. And we're going to be discussing 543, which is what the exam is on. I anticipate we will, like we normally do, the exam will be released on Friday. We'll have really as much time as you need. The next week, of course, is finals week, so you get to do your test a little bit early if you want. You want to wait till finals. You're free to do that, but all we're going to do is cover Mod 43. We're not going to do a comprehensive review of the whole semester. Actually, I was thinking of doing a video like that just for fun. You should have a handout. It's from the DSM-5 that's on Blackboard. The digital page number on your Blackboard is page 137 and 138. If you were to happen to have the actual DSM in your possession, it would be page 99 and 100. But it's unlikely that you would have that. So those two pages, which I actually gave out last week, are the diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia. And the big difference between psychosis and non-psychotic mental illness is with psychotic mental illness, there is a break with reality, meaning the person who is suffering from this disorder is not reality-based in some ways. Now, this manifests itself in a lot of different ways. This video we're about to see is for clinical patients who suffer from schizophrenia. I believe the video was probably made for either some type of medical certification, step 1 or step 2, and probably step 1, not step 2, but maybe step 1 in medical school, or maybe it's just designed for non-psychiatrists who might be working like in the emergency room or coming across. Hi there, welcome back. Might be working with mentally ill patients. Well, I'm telling you, if you work in an emergency room, you don't have to work but a day, probably, maximum maybe 2, and you're going to come across somebody that has mental illness. Because a lot of people that live on the street that have mental illness end up in the emergency room with something. And you may have heard most states have legal provisions that interested or concerned parties can, often it's law enforcement, can forcibly take somebody against their will to a hospital, which is generally in the emergency room, have them evaluated for mental illness issues. Now, of course, they go from the emergency room up to a floor that deals with mentally ill people. And the law differs from state to state, but most states say if you're exhibiting certain behaviors and we have a reasonable belief to think that you're a danger to yourself or others, then we can have you temporarily hospitalized against your will for the purpose of evaluations. And part of what we'll talk about this week is how that section of the law seems to be lost on a lot of people who should know better. And for some reason, well, one of the saddest cases was the case of James Holmes, who was the Joker up in Colorado Well, I'll get into it now. Basically, he was not committed to a for evaluation, and his therapist was a psychiatrist who was head of the neurological sciences department at the University of Colorado. So she was not a person unfamiliar with these diagnostic criteria that's in front of you. Well, that's a whole other story. Anyway, so today we're going to watch this very brief video because, as usual, I can sit up here and talk a lot about schizophrenia, but if it's true that a picture tells 1,000 stories and a video tells 10,000 stories. So I didn't give you the section on the different subdivisions of schizophrenia. I don't think what I gave you gets into that. No. But most of you have probably heard of paranoid schizophrenia, because you know what paranoid means, that you have thoughts that people are out to get you, to do harm to you. And unfortunately, that's one common theme that can occur with schizophrenics. And if it does, then they become diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic as opposed to a catatonic schizophrenics. You will see catatonic schizophrenics in this video. They don't do or say much. So when you see them, you'll see some of them at the very end of the video. They're sitting in a chair, staring out into nowhere land, or they're curled up kind of in a ball. Those are catatonic schizophrenics. They usually don't say much. They don't do much. If they're hospitalized, they're of course on medication, and when it's time to eat, usually some staff member has to come get them and say, "It's time to go eat." Take them down to go get something to eat. Well, you might find this interesting. I think we had I don't know if it's in this study guide or a previous one, but there was a statement along the lines that violence among schizophrenics is very low. If you took 100 people off the street, just random people off the street in El Paso, and took 100 people diagnosed with schizophrenia, you would find more violent people than just a group of 100 people randomly selected from the street. So they're not necessarily aggressive or harmful. They have paranoid thoughts, and if they think somebody's out to get them, which is a portion of the problems of paranoid schizophrenia, then that might lead them to act on it. But most don't. The ones we hear about, like James Holmes, Jared Loeffner from Pima Community College over in Tucson, he's the one who shot Gabby Giffords and killed the federal judge. Unfortunately, killed like a 6-year-old girl who went to listen to Gabby Giffords give a talk as a congresswoman. And we're going to see Jared Loeffner. I have a video of him, and we're going to show you some of the things I'm talking about. So with this, I want you to take close attention as to what these patients do. In general, not all patients are the same. It's not correct to paint them with a wide brush, but a lot of people with mental illness do not want to make facial contact with you. You will see in this video that some do, and it's usually when something important is being discussed. So just because they have schizophrenia does not mean, number one, they're stupid. Number two, that they don't understand some social rules of interaction. Now, of course, that gets blown away a lot of times if they've got some kind of hallucinations or delusions going on. Anyway, anybody know the difference between hallucinations and delusions? You've heard of hallucinating drugs like LSD or MDMA. Hallucinations involves any of your five senses. So normally when we talk about hallucinations, we talk about hearing things like voices in my head, seeing things like blood coming out of that wall when it's not there, or feeling things like bugs crawling on me when I don't. Any of your five senses, tasting, smelling, all your senses are eligible for hallucinating. That's hallucinations. Delusions are thinking problems. Like some of us who are critical of some of our present politicians who say, oh, we can solve the fuel problem by releasing 50 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserve. And that's going to help the United States, and it's going to help prices go down. Well, those of us who know better would say, whoever's speaking that, Mr. President, or any of his delusional staff, and say, hey, dude, 50 million barrels of oil will last the country for 2.5 days. That's it. It's not going to have squat to do with prices of gasoline and lowering the prices. Nothing. So if you think it's going to do that because you believe people like your transportation secretary, who doesn't even know how many barrels of oil we use a day, then you're delusional, and so are they. Delusions they come in many forms. Many of the preoccupation that schizophrenics have to do with power. So if they're delusional when it comes to having delusions of power, they may think that they are Hitler, they are some famous king or something. Delusions can, especially in the paranoid section, have to do with, I'm a member of the CIA, I used to be a member of the CIA is trying to get me, Mossad is trying to kill me, aliens are sending messages to me and they want to do me harm, and all those things. Sex is a powerful motivator, part of our life. So a lot of their delusions have to do with sex. I have a video that it's amusing because of what this guy says, but it certainly shows why he is the way that he is. I don't think I have to shut the door on this one. When I show the other one, I will. Let's get started here. This is a typical situation. This guy is the patient in a mental hospital. This is a patient advocate. He is up for review. One of the critical things that we have tried to correct in the system is not having people just warehoused in a mental institution and just left there forever. So we have these ongoing evaluations. Oddly enough, when I was a district attorney, I attended these hearings in the mental hospital, and my job as a state prosecutor was to advocate to the judge, and it was their decision to hold the person in the mental institution if the facts warranted. And then when I became a defense attorney, I actually became a legal patient's rights advocate, and I would advocate for what was in the best interest of the patient, which might not be what the patient wants, but it's what I would feel is their best place to be. For instance, if you got somebody who the staff and the professionals have figured out that they are a danger for killing themselves, and they want out of the hospital, then as a patient advocate or as a assistant public defender, it would not be my desire to fight for them to get out of being in the hospital if it meant that there was a good chance they're going to kill themselves once they get out. All right.
Legal basis, why you have to stay here.
Hear that?
If it was up to you, would you like to leave the hospital tomorrow?
I'd like to leave the hospital tomorrow because I've got things I gotta do.
No eye contact. He's talking down. Very common. But his voice is pretty well modulated. You'll notice when we talk about emotionally flat emotions, which is a negative symptom of schizophrenia, means there's no emotions to whatever they're talking about. Oh look, the building's on fire. You know, that's he'll do that in a minute.
Okay, well,
It's the first
I'm gonna
one.
be,
There's a lot of bills to be paid and all that.
okay, what brought you into the hospital?
I turned myself in at 5150 because I thought I'd kill myself.
Okay, so you came here voluntarily.
30 seconds.
So his thinking at this point is really clear. He's citing the California law. He's talking about how, in essence, he was self-admitted to the hospital. And he's about to describe what was going on, which we don't know whether that's true or not, but it sounds logical.
I thought I'd kill myself.
Yeah, what was going on that you felt like killing
It was
yourself?
3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. All the same thoughts kept racing through my mind over and over and over again. I just wanted them to stop. Period. And I thought, well, if I kill myself, I'll stop thinking.
Negative symptom, flat affect. This is obviously directed towards people who are giving this guy a clinical diagnosis. Decreased outward expression of emotional state, whether it's positive state or negative state, doesn't positive as far as feelings and negative as far as feelings. Negative is like when we study behavioral modification. You have positive punishment and negative punishment. It has nothing to do with good or bad. Positive punishment, you remember smacking somebody, give them something. Negative punishment is you take away something like their computer so they can't play games or communicate with friends. So he has negative symptoms, meaning he's not showing the emotions of being unable to lead when he wants to. It's all flat.
With that, that's too good of an idea either because you've got friends and people around you who love you. So I stopped that thought. And I said, well, who am I going to call? I called Ghostbusters. I mean, God, you know, it's a joke. And called Ghostbusters. I called.
Funny joke, but he didn't laugh, neither did the patient advocate. Makes you wonder, you know, when you work around patients, you get a little bit callous, or because you wouldn't want to laugh at a patient, but that was funny. You're going to call Ghostbusters. No, I'm just kidding. Well, you notice none of those physical expressions of emotion are present. He just delivers them flat.
One of the crisis interventions
Okay.
said, I talked to them on the phone. They said there was nothing they could do for me for one night. So I went up here by ambulance. Paid ambulance to take me. This is crisis intervention, couldn't do anything for me.
Have you ever made any suicide attempts?
I had a couple of them when I was 19.
Okay. Are you usually able to ask for help?
That's an interesting statistic. 40 to 50% of patients attempt suicide. Why would that be? You know, we talk about depression. He's not depressed. And when they say 40 to 50% of the patients, they're not just talking necessarily schizophrenia. But if it were ethical for us to get on a bus, go down to one of these hospitals that's got a psychiatric ward, and walk through it and see the people in it, this is what you're going to see, especially in a medical hospital, because that's more for acute care as opposed to a mental hospital where this guy is, which is for more long-term care. So if you were to go to an acute care mental wing of many of our hospitals here in town, what you're going to see is people, and when you look at them, they are going to look like they are scared to death. And why wouldn't they? Figure yourself. You've lived as many years as you've lived. You haven't never had a schizophrenic break with reality, and then you get one. That should scare the crap out of you, and it does. When you can't control your own mind, that's one of the most scary things I can even imagine. So if we were to go to an acute center like a hospital wing, you would see a lot of fear because people don't have control of their thoughts and they know it. And it may be the first time it's ever happened to them.
Help when you start feeling like that?
No, I was never in the hospital before.
Okay, so this is a new thing.
So,
You're coming into the hospital.
yeah, when I came in here, it's not, as I'm like, when come into a hospital, people, please help me. So I do not kill myself.
That's all the questions I have for right now.
Okay. This is the end of the conversation. He's going to say a few more things. So at this point, does anybody perceive any of these lists of symptoms for schizophrenia? Did he talk about delusions, hallucination, disorganized speech, word salad, we sometimes call it, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior? No. Negative symptoms? Yeah. But so what? I'm not going to hospitalize somebody for negative symptoms. So at this point, the guy sounds really good. He's got a hearing tomorrow. Maybe he'll get out. She says, that's all I need. Meaning to him, I'm done, dude. You convinced me. You need to get out of here. That's the way I interpret it. So, what was this? Less than a 2-minute conversation. He kept it together. He didn't say or do anything that would give any of us any idea that he needed help, continued help.
I get it. Yeah, I've been very comfortable up here. Somebody trying to shoot me.
Bang. There's his delusional thinking, his paranoid thinking. And I'm telling you as a clinician, he told himself, I need to keep it together. This lady is going to help me get out of this damn place, and I want out. Even though he's self-referred. He's not under a court order. He's self-referred. So, hypothetically, if he's self-referred, he could also sign the paper and leave. The exception to that, of course, is if the clinicians think it's not safe for him to go, and then they're not going to let him go. So he clearly wants to leave. And he holds it together for 2 minutes, and then she says, I'm done, taking notes. That's when he says, I think somebody's out here trying to kill me. Now, is that enough to keep him hospitalized? Of course not. What brought him to the hospital, besides himself, was that suicidal ideation and the racing thoughts. So he's on medication now. So this is pretty much a high functioning guy. Anybody work with patients or anybody work on the street? You can start getting some diagnostic clues about what's going on. Look at this guy's teeth. Specifically, that one right there, he's got more than one. People who use meth, a lot of meth, their teeth turn into like these stalagmites, like you see it Carlsbad Cavern. Instead of being a nice rectangular tooth, it's a spike from smoking meth. Tears teeth up. So this guy minimally has used a lot of meth. And if he's used meth, he's probably used a lot of it too. For all you medical folks, first of all, DX. DX stands is shorthand for diagnosis. When you work in the medical field, instead of writing all these damn words out like me, writing out this symbol for psychology, we all know RX for prescription, DX is diagnosis, TX is treatment, a DX is a dual diagnosis. It's got more than one diagnosis. Like these are his diagnoses: deliria, dementias, severe hypothyroidism, and hypercalcemia, which is high calcium in the blood. And so, medical conditions, they say here, more commonly olfactory, which is your smell hallucinations, olfactory hallucinations, or tactile, which is touch hallucinations. These are a couple of blood workups that, like I said, if people's in an emergency room, these are a couple of medical tests you would order. That's so when we did it, I had a thought about it before that. These are the kind of things that he's admitted to using, hallucinogens like psilocybin or LSD or something, cocaine, a certain number of people with mental problems who live on the street, they use a lot of street drugs, not for recreational purposes, but because they don't like the medication that the hospital gives them, because there's all sorts of negative side effects. So they want to get rid of the voices, they want to not be feeling bad, so they search for street drugs to treat themselves. Very, very common.
Someone else sold it to someone else, I don't know who, but they're able to get a response back to people. I think the down, I think the down is, and with the needles, they're easy to focus a heavier field of pickup reception because of all of it.
This is his delusion. He believes people are sending him messages that he picks up in his teeth because he has a lot of fillings. He probably had an EEG, which you might know what that is. That's where they put the electrodes on your skin, on the outside of your scalp, to look at your brain waves. It's non-invasive, it doesn't go in your brain, but you can imagine him sitting in a chair and a technician telling him, I'm going to test you, I'm going to put these little pads on your head, they're just little sticky pads, they're not going to hurt, and you will hear him in a minute say something about getting money through disability. So if I was a technician and I had to give him an EEG, I would probably tell him, look, dude, if you let me do this examination of your brain waves, it's not going to hurt. And if you have problems with your brain waves and you're telling me you got all these problems, you might be eligible for disability and they'll give you money every month and you won't have to work. Because number one, it's not a lie. That's true. So it might be a motivator for him to participate. But since he's paranoid, he's thinking somebody stuck needles in his head and all sorts of things happen to him.
So,
Person asks, who did this to you?
I think it's people like that Stanford.
I told you this hospital's in California. Stanford, you all know Stanford University is probably the best place to get a medical education, and certainly in psychology is one of the best. That's where Phil Zimbardo was teaching. And Dr. Steele, the one who was telling us about stereotype threat, was a professor at Stanford, probably still is.
And technicians, wealthy technicians.
That's interesting. Wealthy technicians. Because people who go to see him and say, hi, I'm Bill, I'm a technician, I'm going to do your EEG today, blah, blah, blah. So they might be responsible for sticking needles in his head.
Do stuff like NASA.
Now he's involving NASA in his delusion. So he mentioned people from NASA, and he asked them if they had some designs for a rocket ship, and they said no. So I drew it, and I gave it to him. That's, of course, he didn't. It still has it. But this guy's got some delusions for sure. Now, this lady is really interesting. Really, really interesting. She's probably somebody who's been in and out of the mental health system for a long time. Very smart, very insightful. The guy who's talking to her is a psychiatrist. Pretty good one from what I can see of the way he's interviewing her. Now watch the way she does her eyes. Like right now, she's not looking at it. But when she wants to know how he's going to react to something, she will, like you and I would do. If I were to say, hey, hey, you want to go downstairs and have a coffee? I'm looking at you right in the eye, and you go, you know, you give me clues by the way you react. We do that. We look for clues. We do it unconsciously. She's looking for clues, which is a good sign that shows she's got social skills, but she's got a lot of issues.
I get to the point where I don't know anymore. I get past mine takes over. And I think I'm doing good for something that takes over. It scares me. Years ago, I didn't do that. Years ago, I didn't have to worry about it. And there was one was paranoid. I mean, one was crazy.
Now she's given a little bit of social history. Notice how the psychiatrist is not interrupting her talk. He's asked her something, and she's responding, and he's letting her talk so that she feels more comfortable in what she's talking about. Now, here is diagnostic, your categories, which just repeating it for whoever was going to see this video.
I was one who was crazy. I mean, years ago, I could never see that stuff. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. It's pretty scary.
Now she's looking at him.
But I was crazy. Somebody else was doing. When there's people at 7-Eleven, they're always on the phone talking about me. Always. Especially in the summertime, nice weather. They're always talking about on hospitals, barns, things done. There's a lot of doctors that
There's a lot of doctors. Look up into the eyes of a doctor before you say what you're about to say, because it's not complimentary. So she's got social skills, but she lets it rip anyway.
there's a lot of doctors that, don't say well, there's also a lot of doctors and nurses go in and for like fillers and stuff.
And those changes in the attention.
You notice you have problems with attention, silence. What?
Changes in attention for feelings.
Something harder.
Computers having problems focusing attention or keeping the attention.
It takes a special person to interview a mentally ill person. This guy is good. She says, I'm retarded. He doesn't respond to that. He doesn't try to argue with her. No, you're not. You're and nothing. Just let it go and refocus her on the issues that you want her to talk about.
I don't know. What was that?
When's the last time you felt good?
I don't remember.
Wow. What a question to ask somebody doing social history. When is the last time you felt good about life and yourself? Immediately, she does show some affect. No. Well, yeah, she probably doesn't know. She's been miserable probably for as long as she can remember.
Don't like me. This is very important to you, right? Don't like me. I'm in China somewhere.
Like I'm in China or somewhere, because everybody knows things are impressive in China.
Somebody's been suffering years ago, taking OB and says, psychologically, we may not want to take the OB, but to get out of the misery, right?
Out of the mouths of babes and schizophrenics. That is a beautiful statement. People like me who are mentally ill might just take an overdose to get it all over with. Not because they're depressed, but because they're tired of the fight against the thinking and delusional forces inside their brain
he fights every night and every day he goes fighting with him. Michael goes fighting with him. Drop dead, his heart is.
Michael's likely a voice that speaks to her. They listed as an auditory hallucination, which means they determined it to be, there's no one named Michael in her life that's saying these things. But the voices who she's identified as Michael are saying nasty things to her, like drop dead and those things.
That's to me anymore. I'm so used to it.
Now she's laughing. One extreme, emotional ability, labile. Just, so it's emotion, but it's not appropriate.
I think never brain. But I don't have a brain.
I have a brain problem, but I don't have a brain tumor. She thinks that's funny. Okay, check this dude out. He's got a hunk of his hair, and his knees are going back and forth. What does that tell you? That tells you that he is on psychotropic medicine. He is suffering from schizophrenia, and he's on medication. Schizophrenia does not make you act like you're all nervous and twisting your hair and bopping your knees together. The medication does. So he's in a hospital. Dr. Bigelow here, same guy.
I'm saying and feeling as though people are going to electrocute judge you, put me in jail, or kill me electrocute because of some of the sins I've done.
Very, very common delusions. That you've done nasty things, you've done mean things, you need to be put to death. People want to put you to death, electrocute you, stab you, poison you, whatever. Now he does the same thing with the eyes. He's looking at the dark directly.
They think was going to get excited for 30 years. And,
Typical antipsychotic side effects. The medication that was just mentioned was a common medication used for antipsychotic. It's not used so much anymore. It's kind of a dated video. Extrapyramidal symptoms, that's the knees, the twisting the hair. This is a blood problem and another medical problem.
I'm scared of you. Right? I'm so scared I think things got pictures that I have.
So Bigelow tells him it must be really scary. So he's being empathic with him because it is scary. And before he answers this answer, he looks the doctor in the eye and probably makes the decision, I can trust this guy. Because if you got some money and you're sitting at a McDonald's and there's somebody next to you and you say something like this, somebody could get really upset. So he takes the opportunity to look at the doc to see if the doc's going to overreact, just like the woman did when she was about to put down doctors at the QT for calling the hospital and snitching her out for being mentally ill. I'm so scared I can tell you that pictures got a headache. That is mixed up thinking, delusional, disorganized speech.
More about that, the picture has a headache.
Now there he's checking him out again. Do you really want to know? Because I'm about to let it loose and it's going to be crazy.
Probably the next person to make a baby, when one sperm goes up in there, and when they touch, there's two contact points that touch before the other two. And screw up in the air. And when they fuse, it's like nuclear fusion, it's like a chain fusion, there's mass goes to the proton. One of the abstraction goes up in the electron, spins around, goes back down to the proton, to form a line, the line will be reduced to one atom. At this point, what would you like us to do? I'd like you to get off the cigarettes, get me dried out, cleaned up, so I'm really trying to take them to doctor school.
Get me off my cigarettes, get me off my drugs, so I can go home, work in a bakery, which maybe he has, so I can make money, so I can go to medical school. Why does he want to go to medical school? Because he wants to help himself and help other people. There's a guy coming. That guy could sit there all day like that, a little smirk on his face, looking, nothing outside happening. This is very, very common. When I was at the mental hospital, there was a black guy, hair looked a lot like this guy. That's what he did. Sat, bent over with his hands all day. Wouldn't say or do anything unless somebody got him up to go to the bathroom or go eat. There's some more. This is sort of like the three monkeys, you know, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, trying to cover up outside stimuli so you maybe it's got voices going on or something. Another guy got his hand clasped, talking to his fingers. Probably does that all day. Another guy just staring out in space. And I want you to see the whole tape. A little folder here. Well, thought I had this. That one.